You've heard of girl math, you've heard of boy math. Now let's hear about colonizer math. Colonizer math is being enacted in surprise when violent colonization and oppression is met with violent resistance. People have the right to resist.
Welcome to my channel, Outspoken Samantha. If you are new here, welcome. I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button. And if you're returning, welcome back. I truly do appreciate your continued support on my channel, and I hope that you are subscribed as well. So it's been about 10 days, give or take, since the surprise attack by Hamas on the people of Israel. For most of us, the images that flooded social media as the brutal assaults were being carried out in real time seemed absolutely unreal. Yet the horror slowly set in as we snapped out of this haze and realized that there are people in the world that are truly this evil. That there are people in the world who can show us what it really means not to have a soul. That there are people in the world whose hearts and minds are so devoid of humanity that demons themselves would pass by and think there is literally no work to be done there. And thank you to the new Twitter platform, where the left cannot heavily censor what we can and cannot see. We've been able to have full access to the reality of this situation and how it unfolded. And we can see the true brutality of not just war, but what happens when there are people who exist with no limits on what they will do to others. The first videos and images that really stuck in my mind there was this image of this men piled in the back of this truck with this mostly naked woman lying face down with her head bloodied, her legs twisted in unnatural positions, and the men grabbing her hair and waving their arms cheering like they had just come back from a hunting trip and they were showing off their game. There was this video of the brutalized woman, the woman in the back of a Jeep, and you could see severe wounds to her face, her hands tied behind her back, and as she was led out of the trunk to the back seat of the vehicle, being aggressively pulled by her hair, you can see the blood covering the back of her pants and can only imagine the horror and humiliation that were carried out on her body just minutes before. There are countless videos of Hamas terrorists going door to door, hunting down innocent families, shooting bullets into windows and doors, killing family pets, lighting homes on fire, and mocking their captors before the sound of gunshots put an end to the sobbing and the pleading. I've seen the images of bloodied cribs and car seats and the reports of dismembered toddlers and babies. This attack was unprovoked and it was 100% geared toward civilians. As much as the talking point has been that this was in line with this long-standing claim to land, that argument doesn't hold any water in this. This was a situation where the things we'd normally expect from people who want to start a war, where they'd launch rockets and missiles at armed military bases against those who were actually prepared to fight, those kind of attacks were not good enough for these people. This was a terrorist group who wanted to look into the eyes of each of their terrified, defenseless, unarmed victims, man, woman, child, young, old. It didn't matter, and who took absolute joy and satisfaction at snuffing out their life, sometimes using slow, torturous methods. And these atrocities have been on full display. There's no hiding them. There's no censoring them. There's no softening the blow. Hamas does not want the cover of the mainstream media to put a spin on their actions. They don't want us to contextualize their behavior. They don't want us to try to add to the bigger picture. They want us to take their brutality for exactly what it is. There were several instances of them taking the phones of their victims and live streaming the torture and murder of these people, mocking the loved ones who were watching in horror. It's not like the politicians we have here in America, because remember, Hamas is, for all intents and purposes, the official government of Gaza, where they heavily rely on the media to take their actions and put a spin on it or cover up the parts that sound the worst. Hamas does not want that. They don't want anyone to cover for them. They don't want someone to put a spin on their actions. They put these things directly on social media and proudly paraded bodies through the streets so they could show the world their soullessness and the fact that they have no limits about what they will do to human beings. Hamas is not trying to pretend that they are any more humane than they actually are. They are proud of their soullessness. They are proud of their Jew hatred. They are proud of the fact that they can look at other people and just simply based on their belief system, they can detach themselves from humanity and not even think twice about decimating their bodies. When we've talked about and learned about past wars and past conflicts, the Revolutionary War, World War I, World War II, the Civil War, the Gulf War, we hear retold stories of what happened as historians and journalists try to paint a picture of what was happening at the time. And we learn from personal writings and from correspondence that people had. And as people attempt to describe what it is that they were witnessing, the horror that unfolded before their eyes, the pain, the wounds, the gunfire, the fear, the bombings, the utter devastation, and the hate, despite all of that, it is easy to keep a distance from it because in a way, there's only so much that we can understand being this far removed from it. And even the most in-depth descriptions of the torture that prisoners of war endured can't even begin to help us grasp the true evil and depravity that some people are truly capable of. With the Nazi treatment of the Jews and other prisoners and their concentration camps, prisoners of war camps, internment camps, like I said, we can read stories, we can watch documentaries, we can listen to first-hand accounts of survivors and even see pictures of the piles of bodies from the aftermath of the gas chambers. But still, there's no way to truly get it. And during World War II, because of the heavy control of information by Hitler and his regime at the time, there were many Germans who stood with him and with the Nazis, who later claimed that they had no idea what was going on in the concentration camps and what they were actually putting these people through. And there are many who deeply regret raising their hands to this evil dictator because they were lied to, and they were lied to so that he could secure their support and convince them that the extermination of this religious group was necessary for their good. And to some extent, we can offer them a little bit of grace for simply operating on the information that they had or didn't have at the time, though it is hard to find a way to excuse support for rounding up any group of people for any reason and sending them away just because you disagree with their religion. And we can hope that had they known, they would have denounced their own leaders for what they were doing and recognized that these were acts beyond oppression or even punishment, that this was utter savagery. However, unlike the people who did cheer for Hitler and the Nazis at the time, where it was largely due to the fact that they didn't know the full extent of what it was that they were supporting, now, when people stand and cheer after this brutal and inhumane assault by Hamas, we can see exactly what it is that they're cheering for. And they know that they are literally praising barbarism and utter inhumanity. But the question is, who would cheer for them? Over the last few years, many of us have been utterly baffled by the issues that America has been divided on, and usually divided by party. We never expected to have to argue about why parents have the right to raise their own children. We never expected to be divided on whether or not kids should have access to depraved pornographic material in school. Material that parents and other adults will get called out for being disgusting and inappropriate if they read out loud during a school board meeting where only adults are present, yet somehow they defend making it accessible to kids through their school library. We never imagined having to make the case for why children should not be allowed to permanently halt their mental and physical growth with potent drugs and hormones, or permanently sterilize their bodies with no maturity or life experience to help them grasp what the irreversible consequences will be. And we never imagined having to defend children's innocence by insisting that age limits on adult content or entertainment is not actually an act of oppression, but an act of protection. After witnessing these absolutely horrifying acts of absolute inhumanity, the West erupted in pro-Palestine rallies. Not pro-humanity, not anti-savagery, but pro-Palestine, which in this case can be very much counted as pro-Hamas rallies. These were acts carried out by terrorists. They were not Palestinian citizens or even some kind of standard military operation, because of all the wars and global conflicts we've seen over the last several decades, there are certain standards and codes of conduct, even in war, that we've all come to expect both sides of the conflict to abide by. If this doesn't scream moral crisis, I don't know what does. But the question is, where did it come from? Like, how did we get this far? I think there's a couple of things that have happened here that are really important to discuss. First, in our reluctance to define a specific American culture, we've just said that anyone can come here and we expect nothing of you. And yes, as the United States of America, we don't tell people what religion they have to practice. We don't tell you what God you have to pray to. We don't put limits on, the practices of your culture, unless, of course, you're engaging in human sacrifice or honor killings, then that is definitely not okay. But unfortunately, because of this heavily indoctrinated idea that defining a specific set of values as a stipulation to immigrating here, like, I don't know, you can't absolutely hate America and want to burn it to the ground, we are now paying the price for it. According to this article that says how we turned our universities into Hamas cheerleaders, it says, how did nearly every major college campus turn into the Third Reich overnight, with large gatherings of belligerent rally-goers chanting genocidal slogans against Jews? It didn't happen overnight. Over a generation, we've imported the Muslim world to our college campuses. Not surprisingly, we also imported some of the slogans, chants, and values undergirding it. Is this what we really need for our civilization? The ubiquitous pro-Hamas rallies we've seen on nearly every major college campus over the past week are not the typical end the occupation rallies. They began these celebrations immediately after the Hamas slaughter in southern Israel on October 7th and before Israel even announced its intention to attack Gaza. Whether it's the chants of Intifada or From the River to the Sea, there are thousands upon thousands of college students belligerently repeating genocidal slogans and essentially making universities unhospitable to Jews or any sane person. Obviously, the solution is not to violate the First Amendment and ban raw speech, especially in public universities. We must understand the source of this problem, however. Over the last years, we have turned our universities over to foreign countries, admitting more than 1 million foreign students a year. At least 100,000 come every year from predominantly Muslim countries, including from places like Iran, which we've been in a Cold War since 1979. I compiled data of foreign students studying in the U.S. by country of origin per the Institute of International Education. You can look at some of those numbers. It says in the 2021-2022 academic year alone, the United States admitted close to 100,000 new students from countries that are almost exclusively Muslim, many of which are infested with terrorist organizations. We also had more than 14,000 students from Nigeria, which is about half Muslim, and nearly 200,000 from India, which is 14% Muslim. Some of these countries send thousands of students every year. Thus, in addition to the unlimited growth under the King Abdullah Scholarship Program for Saudi nationals, we brought in tens of thousands of foreign students from Iran, Turkey, and Kuwait. It's not hard to see how aspiring young radical Islamists could come to America on student visas and form cells of terrorists on our soil. Most certainly, the vast majority of them harbor sentiments that are out of sync with American values and beliefs. While there are obviously many people who are coming to learn, it's also the case that many of these students from Muslim countries bring with them anti-American and often anti-Semitic culture they grew up with back home. It's easy to see how their migration back and forth to home as foreign students could make them prime recruiting targets of professional jihadist organizations. Another sad casualty of mass numbers of foreign students in U.S. universities is the decline of Americanism. Obviously, American liberals did a fine job stripping patriotism from the culture of college campuses long before the massive influx of foreign students, but a huge presence of students who have no stake in this country doesn't help. Of course, that's not to say that every single Muslim student that comes here wants to burn America to the ground or hates it or doesn't appreciate what they gain from coming here, but you can't deny that we are going to end up with people here based on what they were learning at home that bring their anti-American, anti-Western civilization and anti-Christianity and anti-Jewish beliefs with them. It's going to cause a problem, coupled with the fact that this is what they are being taught in our universities to our own American citizen students. And that's laid out perfectly here.
Hamas is not a terrorist group.
Oh, it isn't, ma'am.
First of all, Hamas is not a terrorist group.
Hamas
Hamas is not a terrorist group.
What is it, like a motorcycle club?
It is a resistance that has been fuming for 75 years of colonialism, of occupation, of murder, of rape, of little children, of women. That's what they are. They are resistance.
Do you think Canada is a colonialist country too?
Everything that they do is justified.
Including what happened last week?
Every single thing they have done is justified.
Ma'am, there were children murdered, there were babies beheaded.
Babies beheaded, really? Please educate yourself.
Well,
Please check the news, because as a news reporter, you gotta check the fucking news, because they said that shit was fake. Okay? Multiple times.
Actually, that story was verified several different times on several organizations, and there were only like 1 or 2 platforms that tried to debunk it. But I would think that if you're going to come out and say that every single thing Hamas has done is justified, that you would know what it is that they actually did. So is your line in the sand saying that, you know, if you found out that this was true, that you would denounce them and that you would say it was inappropriate and that you would say it was evil? Because I don't think that she would. So it's easier, instead of acknowledging the truth, to throw out things like, get educated. That's not a response. That's just dodging the question and dodging the issue and absolving yourself of having to actually admit what happened. Of course, as I said, the mass immigration of people from anti-America countries are not the only people to blame. Because to complement, as it said in this article, to complement the massive influx of immigrants who have been able to flood the US and bring their anti-American beliefs with them, our liberal institutions have been indoctrinating kids who were born and raised here to hate this country and agree with these anti-American cultures and agree that America is evil and oppressive and needs to be dismantled. We have heard this over and over again over the last several years, so we know that this anti-American hatred is being fostered and spread like a cancer through liberal universities. The next generation of young people in America has been prepped and primed and prepared through our colleges and universities to accept the most horrifying and evil, soulless ideas and acts, and they truly believe that they are being used for a good purpose. And we've heard for the few years now, these leftist academics, they like to throw out this word colonizer. It's apparently a really big insult, but for the most part, I don't know about you guys, but just like a lot of the other words that they like to throw out there, like racist or white supremacist or phobic, this or that, I just rolled my eyes whenever they would say colonizer and took it as another word that they just like to throw out there simply when you disagree with them. However, over the last week and a half, we've started to get this terrifying reality of what these kids have been brainwashed into believing associated with this idea of decolonization. They use the word colonizer to point to evil, oppressive people who are, according to them, living on land that never belonged to them in the first place and who now deserve to be retaliated against with violence. According to Palestinians, the colonizers are the Israelis, as apparently their existence in the state of Israel is oppressive to the people of Palestine. Their existence in the state of Israel is unforgivable and must be addressed by any means necessary through the act of decolonization. But I would like to just point out to anybody that is a Palestinian, whether you live there, whether you're from there, and anybody that is standing on the side of this group, the people oppressing Palestinians are not the Israelis. It is Hamas. And even if Hamas were to completely conquer Israel, they have no intention of ever allowing Palestinians to live a free and productive life. They will continue to keep their people living in controlled and impoverished conditions while they empower themselves and line their own pockets, as they've always done in the past and as they will continue to do in the future. But in America, they are being taught that the white people are the colonizers, and as part of their social justice activism and virtue signaling in the most extreme form, that decolonization of white people is what's necessary. In America, they're being taught that white people are the colonizers, and as part of their social justice activism and virtue signaling in the most extreme form, they're taught that decolonization of the white people is what's necessary. And these ideas have been hammered into the minds of college kids who go to school on these liberal campuses. And while we think that they're going to get an education and emerge with a set career path and life goals and more clarity for a fulfilling and productive future, they're actually being trained to hate, to despise, and to condone violence. In a recent video by James Lindsay, he lays out exactly what has been promoted in our academic institutions, the places that we send our kids to secure a better and brighter future with further independence and focus on their careers. But they're really being fed through this machine to emerge with the kind of hate and the lack of humanity and desensitization to brutality as needed so that they can be ready to carry out whatever is asked of them to tear down America as a Judeo-Christian nation. James Lindsay is very soft-spoken in these videos, but it's important to hear what he's saying. I'll link the video in the description box so you can go and watch the whole thing. It's about 20 minutes long, but I'm going to play about a minute of it so you can kind of get an idea of what these kids are learning.
What people have noticed, rightly freaking them out, and it's one of the biggest red pill factories that's happened in a while, many of the current things tend to be that way, is that professors and other academics and leftists and activists all over the place are celebrating the horrific violence. They're celebrating acts of brutality and by the Hamas forces, and they are saying things like, "Did you think that decolonization was just on paper? That it was just essays?" In fact, they're saying that it's intrinsically violent, and they are right. That's why some long time ago, a year ago, I recorded The Violence of Decolonization to introduce this. But I want to read a couple of the giveaway paragraphs in Sartre's foreword. Now, there are arguments as to whether or not Sartre accurately presented Fanon's argument. I don't care about those arguments. It was certainly the way Fanon's work was presented to and teed up for the Western academic, the Western leftist academic in particular. And Sartre's argument can be boiled down to the idea that the people doing decolonization, can and should be as violent as necessary. And in fact, Europe should just lay down and die. The so-called strange death of Europe, as we've heard of it referred to, as Douglas Murray wrote about, is in fact following the roadmap laid out by Jean-Paul Sartre in this foreword.
And just to get a little bit more of a clear idea what that all means, I believe this was a reporter from the Epoch Times, but I'm not entirely sure. About a minute here explaining what this all means.
Socialist groups, student groups, and the main organizations that have for years acted as the hidden hands of woke politics are openly supporting calls for genocide against Jews. What they're calling for is decolonization. What's decolonization, you might ask? Well, James Lindsay of New Discourse has explained it before as a theory from the radical Marxist Frantz Fanon, and Fanon argued in his book that, quote, decolonization is always a violent phenomenon. Now, decolonization in this case is a reference to the Marxist killing of people deemed to be oppressors within their dialect of struggle. And by labeling Israelis like this, and by suggesting that decolonization is needed to free Palestine, what the socialist radicals are calling for is the killing of Israelis. This is coming from the radical left.
And this is a woman who has accepted this as a normal idea, as this is something that we should just all be willing to accept. Now, she is in Australia, but still, it just shows like how far-reaching this idea has gotten, and something that we should definitely be concerned about.
Not an expert on the politics of Israel and Palestine, but it is also deeply unsurprising to me seeing what's happening in Palestine. Because everyone is acting, like some people are acting confused, and the instinct here, given the complexity, is to see things in terms of this is horrific, what's happened to Israel. But when you all examined colonization and decolonizing, what did you actually think that would look like? Like, for real, it is so interesting watching people comment on this. And it's like this visual struggle of respectability politics and the way that there should be a diplomatic solution. And when you are violently oppressed for that long, What do you think the uprising against your oppressors looks like? And as a white person living in colonized Australia on stolen land.
So this girl sees herself as a colonizer, and she has accepted these ideas from this far left activist movement, and therefore she apparently would not blame anyone for attacking her or her white friends or loved ones just for existing, because she believes that because she's white, she's automatically an oppressor, which are ideas taught directly from critical race theory. And she believes that she's on land that her ancestors violently stole and took over, and that she doesn't have a right to live there. And she even seems slightly amused at the idea of innocent people potentially being brutalized, if that's what it takes. And of course, it comes as no surprise that BLM would be in favor of a terrorist group. Black Lives Matter Grassroots stands in solidarity with our Palestinian family who are currently resisting 57 years of settler colonialism and apartheid. As Black people continue the fight to end militarism and mass incarceration in our own communities, let us understand the resistance in Palestine as an attempt to tear down the gates of the world's largest open-air prison, something I'm sure North Korea would deeply challenge them on. As a radical Black organization grounded in abolitionist ideals, we see clear parallels between Black and Palestinian people. And then this guy is a real treat.
Great to see how many Black people agree with Palestine. But can we have that same energy here in the Americas for us right now? Can the great minds that we have for Black people come together and create an organization that's gonna start our revolution? Oh, Haji, Black people can't agree. Shut the fuck.
And this was a professor at Cornell.
It was exhilarating. It was exhilarating. It was energizing. And if they weren't exhilarated by this challenge to the monopoly of violence, by this shifting of the balance of power, then they would not be human. I was exhilarated.
And if you're wondering what he is referring to, he is referring to the attacks by Hamas on the civilians in Israel. That is what he is referring to as exhilarating and energizing. And this claims to be the group of love and tolerance who also like to tell us how to raise our children. At least now we are getting the bigger picture of what this next generation has been taught about America, and why they absolutely have no problem with anybody who wants to burn it to the ground, and why they are so unbothered by the fact that many of these groups chant death to America because they support it as well. What these kids have been fed under the guise of education is so unimaginably vile, and not just fed, not just taught, it's been hammered into them through social media, through apps, through books, through just the conversations that they're having. It's everywhere. And what's terrifying is that we can see the parallels between the fact that Palestinian children are being taught to hate Jews through their media, through their education, through their books and their art and even their games, and how our own college campuses are teaching students to hate America. These are what kids in Palestine and other areas of the Middle East that hate America are being taught. This is a post from Billboard Chris. It says, Islamic extremists curse their own kids with these teachings. This is a video of these children and what they are taught from the time that they are born. They are taught to hate Jews. They have no idea what this conflict is about. They have absolutely no idea, and they don't need to care because their minds are grabbed by the time from the moment that they are born and steered in the direction of hate so that this conflict can keep going, so that the people that are carrying out now, that it won't stop with the next generation. Even if these kids have absolutely no idea what it is that they hate Jewish people for, they are not going to let it go because they have absolutely no idea that this is not normal. The first little girl says we have to make war to prove that we are stronger than the Jews. And this other little girl, people love Palestine and they are ready to die for Palestine. She's like 9 years old. I want to fight against them, the Jews, and defeat them in war. This kid, it says, at school they teach us that Al-Aqsa and all of Palestine is ours. This little boy says the Jews lie and say that their temple is under the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It was never there. This kid says, I hate the Jews. And this other one says, yes, they teach us that the Zionists are our enemy and must fight them. They teach us that the Jews are terrorists. At school, they teach us about the Jews. They teach us that they are bad people, that they killed our young. They teach us in school that Jews are fickle, bad people. I am ready to stab a Jew and drive a car over them. I will fight. I will ram a car into them, the Jews. We have to constantly stab them, drive over them, and shoot them. Stabbing and running over Jews brings dignity to the Palestinians. This has nothing to do with righting past wrongs and everything to do with being used as a puppet to destroy the people that you hate. In this case, it is to destroy the Jews. In America, these liberal institutions, these college students are being used as puppets to destroy America. And honestly, Hamas are the puppets for Iran. Iran is the core of the hatred for Israel. Iran has always viewed Israel as a cancer that needs to be wiped off the planet. Iran has built a network of at least 19 armed groups on Israel's borders, including Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and Syria, and extended its backing to Iraq and Yemen. And it has provided $100 million annually to Hamas and provides $700 million to Hezbollah every single year. As I said, this is a massive moral crisis because the brutal attacks on Israeli civilians, women, babies, grandmas, moms, dad, and children, it wasn't horrifying because it was against Israeli and Jewish people. It was horrifying because it's barbaric, because it was so beyond inhuman and beyond even what we'd expect to see in the most savage animals in the wild, that there is no defense or context where this should be justified on any level toward any group of people. I mean, since when do we need to hear context when it comes to shooting babies, beheading women, beheading children, and savagely decimating bodies of innocent people before deciding whether or not it's appropriate? And I saw this tweet a few days ago. It says, how can you correctly condemn the recent attacks on Israeli citizens but say nothing about bombing civilians in Gaza? Civilians whose food and water supply is cut off and who cannot escape. How? I am saddened by the loss of any innocent life. And I'm heartbroken that there are so many innocent people caught in the middle of this. But that's not what people who tweet things like this want us to say. You want me to say that it is equal. You want me to say that if somebody goes in and is barbaric towards women and children, and those people retaliate against the people that just completely tortured and decimated innocent human beings, that those are the same things. And it is not the same thing. You want me to say that if I retaliate against someone for shooting a rocket into my kitchen and killing my family, that my actions against them are just as bad as their initial attack against me and my family. And they're not. And I am not going to condemn people for defending themselves against evil. And yes, of course, ideally, peace would be an option, but you cannot negotiate peace with people who do not want peace. The only acceptable peace for Hamas is to see every Jew dead and to wipe Israel off the map entirely. And the collective belief of all of these terrorist groups is to wipe every Jew off the planet, including the 6 million who live in America. The motto of Hamas is, we love death as much as Jews love life. They do not care about peace, and they do not care about human lives, including the lives of their own people. And for the first time in human history, the women on The View actually get something right.
As a child, I lived through a civil war in Nicaragua, nowhere near the violence and the level of arms that we're seeing right now. But I know what it's like to be a child caught in the crossfire and the violence and the death created by adults. The way I feel about this is it's heartbreaking. And if you are human, you've got to be just as sad to see innocent children, whether they are Palestinian or whether they are Israeli. The problem is that Hamas doesn't care about Israeli children or Palestinian children. What they care about is only one thing: wiping Israel off the face of the earth. That's right. That is their sole purpose of existence. And I was reminded of a quote that I'm going to paraphrase from Golda Meir, a premier of a prime minister in Israel in the past. And she said, if Palestinians put down their weapons today, there would be no more violence. If the Jews put down their weapons today, there would be no more Israel.
Yes, war is ugly, but you can tell who has limits and who still has their humanity and who does not. There is no moral equivalency to what is happening here. And this mindset of moral equivalency has led us to this very dark path where we're starting to grasp and to justify the most heinous and egregious behavior. It's like the people who say that kids should be allowed to access pornographic novels in school because their parents let them read the Bible, and the Bible contains descriptions of things that aren't always G-rated. But these are the kind of arguments that take people to a place where so many young people are today, believing the lie that evil is okay depending on who it's coming from or who it's aimed at, and that ideas of what's right and wrong are oppressive because they come from the social constructs of antiquated Christian values. We're seeing firsthand what happens when America goes from being strong to weak and moral to soulless. It reminds me of the movie The Count of Monte Cristo, which my family and I just watched a couple of weeks ago, when Edmund is in prison having a conversation with the old man from the cell next to him, who happens to be a priest. And Edmund tells this man that he no longer believes in God. And the old man says, well, that's fine, but what are you going to replace him with? And I think that's an important perspective because we've seen this massive effort, again, mainly pushed by the left, to remove God from our school, from our public institutions, and from anything that references him. And so many people have gotten comfortable with his lack of presence in our lives. And unfortunately, what we're seeing that space be filled with is the most vile and evil ideas. These kids are losing their humanity and their soul, and it's destroying our country. These kids are our future leaders, our future doctors, our lawyers, our engineers, our professors, and our business owners. Yet they carry a worldview that says certain people are inherently evil and it is okay to exterminate them by any means necessary, that certain people are victims that can never escape their victimhood. Some people are oppressors and they can't do anything about it, and anyone who believes in moral boundaries is really just trying to take away their rights. And they're operating under the lie that once they destroy what is right and good and just, that their lives will be better. Just like the Palestinian people have been convinced to believe that if Israel disappears, that all of their problems will be solved. Spoiler alert, it won't. Hamas has no intention of ever allowing the people of Palestine to ever live full, happy, productive, and free lives. Ever. Their lives, the kids' lives in America who believe that once they destroy America, that they're going to live in this utopia, that their lives are going to be so much better. It's not going to happen. In fact, their lives will probably get significantly worse because as they destroy what's good and right, it'll empower the evil people at the top even more. Just like when you remove God from your life, that space is empty and must be filled with something. When you remove good people from the earth, that space will be taken up with something, and it won't be those who want to see you happy and successful. I know this was a long one. I really appreciate you watching it with me. I would love to know your thoughts on this. I would love to know your thoughts on what these kids are learning about colonization and decolonization, because I really do think that this has major implications for the future of American society. And, you know, like I said, the things that these kids are being taught to accept and be desensitized to and to be okay with. But if you do have any defense of Hamas comments, you can pretty much just keep scrolling. Don't bother to say anything because I'm not interested in hearing those comments. They will be ignored. Other than that, please like this video. It does help me in the algorithm. Make sure you are subscribed. I would love to hear the things that you guys want me to talk about in future videos. Always feel free to email me your ideas or stories that you would like to see more coverage of. Be sure to hit that thanks button and donate to the channel in a small way if you can. Look in the description box for other ways that you can support the channel. But I do appreciate your support. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.